Grocery shopping. One of the critical places that we are going to be able to apply our lifestyle skills, including and particularly label reading. Okay? But let's go through this sequentially. Some of these tips will apply to other situations in which we are in a food environment. Don't shop hungry. Shop after a healthy meal or snack if at all possible. If you cannot, ICE standing for in case of emergency, go right to the chopped fruit section and eat a box of fruit. Just please pay for it, of course, when you leave. All right? Prior to leaving the house, try to kind of survey what you need, and you can consider the refrigerator, the counter, obviously the freezer too, recipes for the week, what's in the pantry. Make a list, if at all possible. Sometimes you're really in the rhythm and that's not necessary, but particularly beginners, it's helpful till we get used to a rhythm, okay? It can help you stay on target. In terms of overall goals and an overview, of course, we should be thinking about loading up on produce. A note about produce picking. It's going to take you time to get good at picking. I have become a very good stone fruit picker, for instance. I am very good at picking things like nectarines and plums and peaches and apricots. And it takes a little time to understand that perfect, subtle softness and smell, but practice these techniques. Look up the techniques online as far as picking fresh fruit and getting the best available. You know, from A to, I guess they can't think of a Z, but let's think of W, right? All the way from apples to watermelon. So that you can really refine your skills and pick the type of fruit that makes you satisfied and happy, because whole fruit is a great way to satisfy the sweet tooth, yet provide a whole ton of benefits. And of course, when it comes down to fresh versus frozen, good news for you. Flavor-wise, fresh is the best. Nutrition-wise, frozen is excellent. Arguably, potentially better in terms of nutrition because it is typically flash frozen right when picked at the peak point of freshness. So while there are some biochemical characteristics of freezing that cause some microstructure to be shifted and taste a little different, obviously, for instance, if you thaw out frozen berries, it's not going to taste the same as a berry that hasn't been frozen, but nutrition-wise, I want you to rest assured, is fantastic when it comes to frozen fruits and vegetables. If you're not good at cutting, spend a little extra on pre-cut, pre-washed. Pre-washed spinach is something, or pre-washed mixed greens. Buy them by the pound. You can reach in, grab them. No need to rewash pre-washed. Yes, on occasion, very rare things happen in terms of facilities where you might hear about an E. coli breakout here or there. It is very few and far between, and frankly, with the amount of bacteria going on in the kitchen, we have good evidence and is strongly advocated by the Center for Science in the Public Interest not to rewash pre-washed. So whether it's inside of a smoothie, a protein smoothie where you're throwing in some spinach or you're throwing some mixed greens together for a salad or some spinach in an omelet, or you're sauteing some lightly in a touch of oil, but overall still low calorie density to put on the side of a meal. So quick and easy, pre-wash, mixed greens and spinach, fantastic. It's all good, right? You want to think about that look of a grocery cart in terms of whole fruits and vegetables really making up, like they say, half of our plate, half of the cart. Now, sometimes you're just going to shop not for every single thing, and you're just loading up or getting one thing or the other. Fine. But in terms of for instance, weekly shopping experience where you're loading back up, and in general in life, of the overall way that our average grocery carts over a month would look, it should be at least half from whole fruits, vegetables, leafy, green and colorful vegetables, as well as root vegetables and your tubers. Don't be afraid of the potato, whatever color they are. You already know the data now from the OmniCarb study from Harvard and Johns Hopkins. It doesn't matter whether it's a sweet or a white potato or a purple potato. Glycemic index doesn't matter. Does it come from the ground, and is it minimally processed and intact? If that's the case, the health benefits are there. All right. Now, if you think about the other plants beyond the produce, things like you might get some dried legumes, or even things in a can or a box now. They have a lot of low sodium, no salt added legumes, for instance, or even grains. You can find corn in a can, no salt. Those overall healthy plants we'd like to think of as making up at least, including whole grains, 75% or more of the grocery cart, right? Now, in terms of the dairy department, there are definitely some issues that we should discuss, and I would like to help clarify some points that I think you'll find very interesting. First of all, in terms of health benefits, we find that low and fat-free yogurts are really probably the best overall in terms of health benefit, particularly those that don't have an excess amount of sugar added. Don't even have any issue with some low and no calorie sweeteners added. We've discussed that. The evidence is pretty clear that versus sugar, certainly in terms of calorie balance and diabetes risk and weight gain, benefit in terms of using just about any no or low calorie sweetener in moderation. Okay. Of course, there's Greek yogurts with higher protein. There's standard yogurts with standard amount of protein, but low and fat-free yogurts are definitely a really solid choice in the dairy aisle. Now, required for health? Absolutely not. If you're doing this as a healthy vegan, I want to make it very clear dairy is not required for health. What we're helping do is helping people navigate through dairy in terms of the best way to manage risk. In terms of milks, I want to give you a nice, easy visual and emphasize is very clear that you have benefit by decreasing the amount of fat per serving in terms of milk. Okay? In terms of a gallon of whole milk, there is approximately equivalent to 35 pats of restaurant butter inside a gallon of whole milk. Inside a gallon of 2% milk, there's approximately 20 pats, okay? About 20 pats of butter inside a gallon of 2% milk equivalent. 1% milk, you've got approximately 10 pats of butter worth of fat in a gallon of 1% milk. Then some places they carry 0.5% milk, that would be about 5 pats of butter, and then skim milk, which would have virtually no fat. And there's no change in the sugar content. It's still 14 grams of natural lactose sugar per cup, whether it's whole milk or skim milk. So don't believe some TV doctors or other people that say they add sugar to skim milk. Absolutely not true. The only thing that drops is the fat calories. You go from 160 calories per cup when it comes to whole milk down to 80 calories per cup when it comes to skim milk. And the vitamin D is the same, and the calcium is the same. And in fact, technically, there's slightly more calcium in skim milk than whole milk because the calcium is contained in the water fraction, not the fat fraction. Okay? So, as far as non-dairy drinkers, when it comes to the non-dairy milks, unsweetened soy milk is the king. Now there are some legume-based, pea protein-based other milks, but in general, when it comes to rice milk, coconut milk, almond milk, the protein content is so low and unfortunately relatively high sodium to potassium, unlike skim milk, which has a higher protein and nice high potassium, relatively low sodium compared to potassium. Only unsweetened soy milk matches that. Pretty much the same amount of protein, low sodium, high potassium. I'm going to plug for a certain brand because I think it tastes best, though I have no relationship whatsoever. I personally use Silk unsweetened soy milk. If you can get your hands on and you're a fan of cream cheese and you like something that's cheesier, then what's a good alternative? There is a product by a brand called Lifeway. Lifeway makes in a tub a no salt added farmer's cheese. It's got fairly low calorie density. It's got only 1 gram of saturated fat per serving and no salt added, and tastes really good, whether it's on top of some toasted whole grain bread, maybe even with a little scoop on the edge of a hint of salt Triscuit, or whatever the case may be. And in terms of cottage cheeses, the real risk there, as long as you're sticking with a low fat, even a 2%, is not unreasonable. The calorie density is low, but anywhere in the 2%, 1%, or even fat-free, the issue is typically sodium. Cottage cheeses are notoriously high in sodium. Some are better than others. I recently found one that's got under 300 milligrams per serving, which for a 112 gram serving, as we now know, is still high, but it's a lot less high than some that are 450, sometimes even 500 milligrams of sodium per serving. There is a brand called Friendship that makes a cottage cheese that has no salt added. Not all Friendship is no salt added, but they do have a Friendship no salt added 1% cottage cheese. If you can find that at places such as Whole Foods, for instance, and others, that might be a very reasonable choice to help you wean or dilute down from high sodium cottage cheese. You just get your favorite cottage cheese, and then you get some Friendship. You take them both, you dump them both into a big bowl, stir them up together, and then repack that diluted product back into the two containers, and you've got a nice mix. Of course, if you get used to and you don't mind the nice, basically sweeter rather than saltier, or I should say maybe sour rather than sour sweet maybe, the rather unsalty, let's say, taste of no salt added Friendship cottage cheese, by all means, use it as is. But for some people, weaning down from a regular cottage cheese to immediately to a no salt added is a bit too sudden. I went through the transition myself. Cheeseheads, we're still in the dairy department, so let me be honest with you. The lowest sodium cheese all in all is Swiss cheese. So if you are a cheese person, it's a non-negotiable, you're willing to do it, a reduced fat Swiss cheese is your overall best balance in terms of addressing saturated fat and calorie density and sodium. Okay? Kroger has specifically a Kroger fresh mozzarella, not just one mozzarella you buy at Kroger, but specifically Kroger's own fresh mozzarella has some of the lowest sodium I've seen. While the calorie density isn't too bad, the saturated fat is still high at 3 grams per serving. But again, at 10 grams per day, and knowing that that amount of cheese might just open up your flavor profile on something, whether it's on top of a salad or in a veggie egg white omelet, to make you super satisfied and then be able to be willing to do many other things in terms of food choices that improve in terms of health risk, you got to know. As far as the sodium goes when it comes to cheese, Kroger's fresh mozzarella is a winner in that regard. I have to discuss margarines for a moment because there is a misunderstanding that margarines are high in trans fat. They used to be high, and particularly the bars of margarine. Okay, so sticks of margarine had to be filled with trans fat to make the liquid vegetable oil that they use hard, and of course that partial hydrogenation process made a bunch of trans fat. They have found ways to use emulsifiers and so forth, as long as it's not required to be a stick, it's just a softer tub-based margarine that have no trans fats. So on occasion, I will get, for instance, I can't believe it's not butter light. I can't believe it's not butter light because they add more water, lower the calorie density significantly, and of course the polyunsaturated fat from the healthy fat from the soybean is highest in I can't believe it's not butter light. But to me, it's still so tempting that I really cannot buy it all the time. I mean, I find myself going back to toasted bread and margarine, and then it's something that I have to keep an eye on. But I at least want you to know there are myths as far as trans fat and margarines. They are not in current day margarines. Trans fat has been basically banned. Fat-free feta cheese is a great product in terms of calorie density. If you can find a good tasting one with low sodium, I would say good luck, but there's one. There's one worth considering, in my opinion, is from the brand President. So President brand fat-free feta cheese is not unreasonable at all, and in a crumbled, a small amount crumbled inside or on top of an egg white veggie omelet, for instance, in which there's a little bit of oil used to fry it, and I think you've got a place where reality meets science. It's the least high in sodium of all of the fat-free fetas, and it also happens to be the best tasting of them, and they usually don't have a lot of things to say when it comes to taste of fat-free cheeses, because they usually don't taste very good at all. In terms of lowering the amount of calories used with oil, spray butters, such as Pam butter flavored spray, I am all right with. The propellant I have studied is a very small amount, and frankly, you save a lot of calories, and that is the product that they use at the Pritikin Longevity Center. And we know the Pritikin Heart Disease Reversal Program or Intensive Cardiac Rehabilitation Program, Medicare approved, is quite respected. I'm one of the educators for the Pritikin intensive cardiac rehabilitation program, in fact specifically teaching on dietary fats and weight control. So modest amount of use of PAM for butter flavor, or the butter flavored spray PAM is something that I do. And of course, I can't believe it's not butter sprays as well, but just beware. They say 0 calories. It's not true. It is because when something has on the order of significantly less than 5 calories per serving, they're going to allow it to say 0. But look at the serving when it comes to PAM butter flavored spray or any PAM spray, and it's 1/3 of a second. So realistically, per second, it's 7 calories. So if you're going to go for 2 seconds, fine, but that's 14 calories, not 0. They're not able to pull off magic and make oil have 0 calories. That's the story behind that. Big fan of egg whites over whole eggs. To make a long story short, what you've heard about egg yolks, I'm sorry to tell you, it's just simply not true in terms of 0 risk. No single food choice at any single point in time is in and of itself a dramatic issue. I'm a hypercholesterol absorber. Many of you are. Eggs are the most significant concentrated source of cholesterol in the U.S. diet. They're also calorie dense, and the nutrients that are in them are nice, but you can get them from colorful vegetables. So an egg white vegetable omelet with tons of colorful vegetables will be a much better way to get your macular degeneration, cataract risk reducing lutein and zeaxanthin and so forth. And without all of the cholesterol and frankly the calories that come with the egg yolk, as well as a compound called lecithin, which, like red meat's carnitine, can convert into a product in our guts and livers that actually make our arteries more susceptible to cholesterol deposits and plaques. That doesn't mean don't occasionally have an egg yolk. I do on rare occasion. I have a hankering for an egg yolk and I'll have one. It's not about extremism, but it's about being honest with the science. So I prefer to overall use more egg whites. And if I want occasional egg yolk, that's fine. Egg beaters are fine as well. They're basically egg whites with just a teeny bit of salt added and some beta carotene, which is a precursor of vitamin A, a vegetable-based vitamin A that gives it the color like it's egg yolk, but without the calories or cholesterol. In terms of flesh choices, fish is the flesh of choice. Now, are there issues of sustainability and so forth? Yes. I personally have geared myself far more to using lower sodium or no salt added sardines, which I get in olive oil. And if not, you could get no salt added sardines in water. I personally think that adding a little bit of oil or certainly some lemon juice helps, but sardines are a very small feeder fish that provide lots of omega-3 with very low pollutant risk and therefore also are quite sustainable. That being said, we realize people like other forms of fish, and if you use a good resource like Monterey Bay's Seafood Watch website, seafoodwatch.org, or they have a Seafood Watch app, you can look up more sustainable fish options that may be locally available to you. And sometimes there are good farmed fish, sometimes there are more risky farmed fish, sometimes there's great wild fish in terms of sustainability and health, and sometimes there are riskier forms. And they've done a really good job to help keep up to date where those opportunities are. Of course, the portion size is really the most important, because when it comes down to health, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of benefit to going much above 4 or 6 ounces of fish, and therefore one of the best ways to reduce risk is just to reduce the portion size and increase the vegetable fraction of what you're eating in terms of a plate and overall in life. Light tuna is going to be lower in mercury than albacore. Albacore and other fish like shark, tilefish, and swordfish, obviously the biggest concern is women who are going to become pregnant or are breastfeeding. But when it comes to adult health, we're not quite so sure that there's a benefit in terms of watching out for at least something like albacore tuna, because while in autopsy studies of brains with people with dementia, for instance, yes, you look at such brains and find that those who ate more high mercury fish had more mercury, but also had less plaques that caused dementia. So there's such a benefit to fish that might be the case that the benefit outweighs the risk for adults. But light tuna versus albacore, light tunas, chunk light, have less mercury. Therefore, finding a canned light tuna, for instance, in water or in soybean oil, for instance, or wild salmon, for instance, in a can, would be not an unreasonable option. The issue being more about the sodium, but you already know about sodium, how to manage it. You could even rinse, of course, a canned fish for reducing sodium content to some degree. It just takes a few seconds and you can reduce sodium content. Or you can leave it as is and allow it to be the salty flavor for your salad or whatever it is that you have managed in terms of your sodium budget for the day. Okay. In terms of a couple other points, remember that when it comes to fish as the flesh of choice, the large reason is because they tend to be low in saturated fat and high in omega-3 fat, which we know can help the body with lipid or cholesterol management, be heart healthy and even brain healthy, with some evidence that we've got a reduced dementia risk with healthier omega-3 content. Not that you can't get omega-3 from walnuts as well, but the type of omega-3 in fish tends to be more beneficial. But if you're vegan, you can get long chain or fish-like based omega-3 from an algae-based an algae-based omega-3 supplement that avoids involving any animal or fish product at all. Already mentioned about canned sardines, so I do want to mention about shrimp. Shrimp is a very highly eaten shellfish, the most eaten shellfish that we have, but there's a lot of shrimp that are harvested from the ocean and then placed in a salt bath, a trisodium phosphate salt bath that will obviously increase sodium content significantly. Sometimes they're put into ice instead, which is better. You can, for instance, go to Trader Joe's and look at two frozen shrimp that they have there right next to each other in the same serving size. One has over 500 milligrams of sodium and one has less than 200 milligrams. And that's the reason. So pay attention when it comes to shrimp because you may end up getting a lot more salt than you think. Same with land animal meats, particularly raw pork and even poultry. Many are salt injected. So pay attention to the labels. Many of them have them. Okay? So we mentioned that already. In terms of skinless poultry and raw pork, if you're going to find those that don't have salt added or haven't been salt injected, speaking of Trader Joe's, you can get some pork tenderloin from Trader Joe's. You'll look on the back of the package and you'll see that for every 4 ounce or 112 gram serving, there's only 50 milligrams of sodium. Whereas you go to another grocery store down the road, for instance, Kroger and others, they have raw pork tenderloin, and you look on the back and you'll see 330 or 350 milligrams of sodium because it's been salt injected to increase the weight because it's sold by weight, and also to frankly make it more forgivable to poor cooking technique, because even if you cook it too much, the salt will at least keep the moisture inside and then you'll find it more flavorful. I would suggest better cooking technique rather than adding salt to be forgiving for less skilled or less favorable cooking technique. Okay. If you go for antibiotic-free, I would argue you are going to benefit the public health because antibiotics used in animal feed are contributing to antibiotic resistance a lot. But since this is more about your personal health, I'll leave it at that, and we'll add that if there's a significant benefit from organic in terms of organic meats, it's that you can assure that it's antibiotic-free. But there are many meats that are not organic but are antibiotic-free, and so that added benefit I think is not an absolute, but is certainly something I would ask you to consider. Now, when it comes down to ground poultry, ground turkey breast is lean, yes, 99% lean, which means 10% of the calories from fat, which is definitely very low fat, less than 30%. You get into ground 93% turkey and you're talking about 40% of the calories coming from fat. So remember, just because it says turkey, don't presume it's lean unless it says breast. Some of turkey breast, ground turkey breast is too dry unless you're cooking it in something that involves a lot of sauce and moisture. Fair enough, but at least know that you can mix, for instance, ground turkey 93 with ground turkey breast, or at least if you're getting 93%, you're aware that you're going to be getting some extra fat calories, so you can up the, for instance, the vegetables that you're using in terms of lowering the overall calories. You sometimes even see 85% lean turkey, and that is very fatty. That's 70% calories from fat, and I'm going to explain why that's the case right now. When you see this term, for instance, 90% lean, 80% lean, 85% lean, I want you to understand it. So we're going to explain it pretty simply. If you've got a 4-ounce patty, and we're going to say that for 4 ounces, which is 112 grams, to make it simple, it's 100 grams, okay? What 90% lean means is that for every 100 grams, right? 10 grams are fat. Fair enough. Out of 100 grams, 90% lean, 10% fat means 10 grams are fat. That's true. Fair enough. The question is, what are the other 90 grams? Many people would think it's 90 grams of protein, but that's not true. What else is lean besides protein is water. So 90-10 means for every 100 grams, 70 grams water, 20 grams protein. 10 grams fat. But remember, fat has 9 calories per gram. Protein has only 4 calories per gram. So when you're looking at the 180 total calories, you've got 90 calories from fat and 80 grams from protein. Excuse me, it's 170 calories. You've got a significant amount, more than 50% of calories from fat. 50% despite its 90-10. So remember, 10% fat by weight is not 10% calories from fat, all right? And I apologize about the little typo there. So 90 calories from fat, 80 grams of protein, 90 plus 80 is 170 total calories. But again, the 90 calories from fat are correct. And either way, you're talking about 50%, slightly more than 50% calories from fat in a 90-10 meat. So if you really want lean, you're going to be talking 96% or more. That wild game would be along those lines, 96, 97, 98 for venison, for instance, or wild elk. There's a beef by a brand called Laura's Beef, and there's others that Trader Joe's has a 96% lean ground beef. That's 29% calories from fat, and that would meet criteria for low fat, and that's why you'll see the American Heart Association stamp on 96% lean Laura's Beef. She has a 92% lean. That's about 50% calories from fat. That does not meet the criteria for the American Heart Association. Okay? We've already mentioned that with the raw poultry and tenderloin, know about the sodium. If at all possible, choose those that have less than 100 milligrams per serving, because the serving size by standard is 4 ounces, which is 112 grams. Anytime you see more than triple digits on a land animal meat for the serving, it has got to be salt injected. The natural sodium content of an animal is not that high. You will typically see only double digits unless you're talking about poultry with skin, because of course sweat glands have salt. That might be a little bit over 100 milligrams per serving when it's with skin, but for skinless, it should be sodium in the double digits if it hasn't been salt injected. Okay? And when it comes to fattier meats, volumize with vegetables and beans, right? We also get meat from the deli counter. The real big issue at the deli counter is sodium. So I'm going to make it simple here. The terms when it comes to sodium are confusing. There are only 2 terms that matter the most, and that's low sodium and no salt added, especially when it comes to a deli meat. If you see reduced sodium, you are in a world of very little sodium reduction. So if you see lower sodium, don't confuse that with low sodium. So lower sodium, reduced, those are marginally reduced and take you from basically a cirrus cloud down to cumulus cloud stratospheric levels of sodium. Doesn't mean don't have them, but I'm just forewarning you. Here are some products just to give you an example. There are many no salt added turkey breasts. They basically taste like just roasted turkey without any salt added. So, add some mustard, even a little bit of light mayo. That'll give you the salty flavor without all that salt that comes with a otherwise typical turkey breast. There's no salt added from Boar's Head. There's no salt added from Plainsville. There's no salt added turkey breast from Dietz and Watson. And Boar's Head even has a low sodium roast beef, which you see pictured right there on a piece of toasted Ezekiel and some mustard with some lightly sauteed spinach and blueberries. So there's a picture for you, right there. That is a particularly lean roast beef as well. All right. There are no low sodium hams, sorry, but if you're going to have ham, at least go to the lighter sodium or the lower sodium, reduced sodium, and then use sparingly, like a garnish, okay? And we've already mentioned about reduced fat Swiss cheeses as far as your best overall balance in terms of sodium, in terms of calories and saturated fat. Now you've moved along to the frozen foods. Again, we talked frozen fruits and vegetables, super great for nutrition. Taste-wise, one thing, but don't worry in terms of nutrition. The real issue is when they have a lot of sauces blend into them. And then the sodium might be very high. But what if you really like the flavor of that broccoli with the cheesy? Well, maybe you get some frozen broccoli that doesn't have any, and then some with it, and then you mix them together. Or you just steam some of your own fresh broccoli, right, and then you mix it with the frozen broccoli that's from Green Giant with the light cheese sauce. There are ways to dilute down and think about this so that you don't have to be zero tolerance, because you want to have some flavor, you're just trying to manage how much. In terms of frozen entrees, the big issue really comes down to they typically have low fiber, high sodium. Look at the calorie density. Most of them aren't bad as far as the ones that are trying to be healthier, but those that are trying to be healthier, the ones that come out on top these days tend to be the lean cuisine steamers. Okay, they're cafe steamers. The word steamer you'll see quite clearly, and they are microwaved with the sauce separate. So you can just add as much sauce as you want. Add half the sauce, you'll cut the sodium and some of the sugar down significantly. So whatever the sodium content on the box is, it will probably be 20 to 40% less if you just add half of the sauce, which is typically plenty of flavor. Again, that's the lean cuisine steamers. Okay. There are legume and grain blends from Bird's Eye that are great. They have some sodium, but typically they can be managed. They're not unreasonable. Or again, you can mix them. For instance, you can get some frozen brown rice and then mix it with some of these Bird's Eye protein legume grain-based blends that have sauce and dilute down the sodium. Okay, ice cream lovers, let's be honest. Sometimes you want something creamy and ice cream-ish, so let's talk about some. Obviously, low-calorie popsicles are great if they satisfy. Fantastic. You can find a lot of them that are 50, 60 calories. There are yogurt and fudge bars that are out there that are less than 100 calories. One of them is not in the grocery store, but as you see at the bottom, the DQ or the Dairy Queen fudge bar. I think that's a fantastic product. The only problem is you have to get the heck out of Dairy Queen without getting tempted. They typically can be bought in singles or a box of, I think, 5 or 6. But just as good tasting at Kroger are their low-fat fudge bars. They're also like 60 calories, taste great. They don't look as pretty as the Dairy Queen fudge bar, but when you're that hankering for some chocolate ice cream, they taste really good for low cal. Okay. The Kroger makes a low cal pint that's kind of competing with Halo Top. Halo Top's another low calorie ice cream. Just keep in mind most people end up typically going through the whole pint, and the sodium content on some of these is actually surprisingly high. All right. For the yogurt bars, I'll tell you one of my favorites is the Outshine Strawberry Yogurt Bar. That is a very good product. I think almost channels the taste of Haagen-Dazs strawberry to me, and I think that particular flavor in the Outshine is fantastic. Enlightened is another brand that's coming out with less than 100 calorie bars, and Yasso as well. But be careful. If these things start to get out of control, you're eating more than a single portion, just take a break from them. But at least they're there. And every once in a while, of course, you're going to say, I want the real thing. Know that Haagen-Dazs, for instance, and others, Ben & Jerry's, make minis. They make small mini containers because the true serving size of those containers, just like a bag of chips, is the entire container or the entire bag. Questions about organic. I believe in organic for public health. I have no issue with that. I do want to emphasize that a very, very, very small amount of growing land in the United States is certified organic. So it's impossible for me to recommend organic for everybody because it's just not accessible. There aren't even enough fruits and vegetables for the entire United States to increase their intake to optimal levels if we were to ask everyone to do so tomorrow. So when you can get organic, great, fantastic. If the price is right and you can do it, as far as personal health benefits, they aren't going to be as significant as what we would like in terms of the entire sustainability of the food supply. So if you can get it, great. But please, if you're going to compare organic junk food to a non-organic fruit or vegetable, please understand the risk is far higher with organic refined grains, organic salt, organic saturated fat, and therefore be practical. We already mentioned that organic meats, the one for sure benefit you get from them is they are antibiotic free. Also realize that when we see health or organic or some type of healthy claim, we typically tend to eat more. We've discussed that as well. Now, we've already kind of emphasized indirectly that the aisles cannot be avoided. the evil aisles, just shop the perimeter. Those days are over. First of all, the perimeter has all kinds of pies and cakes in them. And in the aisles, there's a lot of diamonds in the rough. Just some examples. You just need to know how to look for them. Dry and canned no salted legumes, and they come in a box as well. Chickpeas. I love getting no salt added chickpeas so that I can add them to my favorite hummus. Dilution is the solution. Or add them to a salad. Uncooked and pre-cooked whole grains, right? Of course, also in terms of uncooked whole grains and uncooked legumes, remember that when you're looking at the calories compared to the weight, triple the serving size for the estimated weight after you cook them for legumes, beans, lentils, and peas, and grains. And there's all kinds of obviously no salt added and dry roasted nuts and seeds, or lighter sodium roasted or raw nuts and seeds and dried fruit, while more calorie dense. If you're looking for something fatty and sweet, obviously a combination of dried fruit and nuts would be much better for your health risk than a whatchamacallit bar. Other things, canned and pouched fish and meats. Just watch the sodium on some of them. You'll find, for instance, significantly different amounts of sodium in canned chicken breast, some versus others. They're not going to brag on it, about it on the front of the label. You're going to have to look at the back. There's obviously all of our seasonings and spices, and where you'll find my favorite smarter salt, Morton light salt. While used in portion-controlled amounts, where are we going to go to get the vegetable oils other than the aisles, particularly, let's say, your extra virgin olive oil, etc. And salsas, which I'll tell you, Frog Ranch. Look at salsas, dramatically different amounts of sodium. Frog Ranch is a brand that has phenomenal flavor for low sodium. Our vinegars, balsamic and otherwise, mustards. There are even reduced sugar and reduced salt ketchups. Even Kroger's come out with a 50% less sodium and 50% less sugar ketchup. That's really good. In the aisles, our sugar-free jams and syrups, you saw some pictures in the aisles. Low-sodium broths, some low-sodium crackers, specifically the Hint of Salt Triscuits, I think is a great blend. It has a solid fiber content and has a nice crunch to it and adds just a little bit of sodium, but it's on the surface, so it tastes saltier than it actually really is. Our sparkling and flavored waters, even diet pops. I would prefer non-cola because there's some risk for phosphoric acid in cola pops, but there you go. And you might have many suggestions that you could add to this list. So the aisles have a lot of diamonds in the rough, all right? So as we're closing here, I also want to emphasize meal replacements. I mentioned some practical ones. Slim Fast High Protein. You're going to find that in the aisles, sometimes even in a pharmacy section, for instance. Meal replacement bars. I don't think they're magic, but sometimes they work, and there's certainly many that are better, whether it's the Quest or the Pure Protein bar or whatever ones that you find that are going to have better numbers now that you know label reading than you would see in terms of saturated fat and sodium than a standard candy bar. Entrees. We just talked about entrees a moment ago, but I wanted to emphasize that they can be a tool for those of you that are in a rush. Just be careful as you're looking. There are more than just the cafe steamers, the Healthy Choice cafe steamers that are out there, but just be careful, particularly when it comes to sodium, when you're looking at these, and try to remember they're just the center, and therefore you're probably going to add some fruit or a salad or something that helps reduce but not eliminate some food prep time. All right. So as we summarize here, remember it's going to take some time as you go through the process. Don't go hungry. If you are, get some chopped fruit, have your mindset, have your list with you, right? Eventually you'll be able to probably do this without a list and restock without so much thinking, but until then, try to use a list to get you through as safely as possible, right? Remember that you're going to see a lot of healthier items in odd places, so be a little bit investigative. Sometimes the healthier high-fiber cereals are going to be way up here or way down below. Sometimes I joke that the healthy items will give you back pain because you're always bending over to find where they are. And practice the label reading skills. They will serve you well. You will eventually get really good at them. Eventually, you'll have to use them less and less as you start to find the staples that you know really help you find where reality meets science in the grocery shopping experience. Thank you and good luck.